Hello, everybody. This is Rick Manning, President of Americans for Limited Government. Crazy day in DC today. It's 4 p.m. and we still do not have a speaker. And what we're seeing is well, actually kind of unprecedented in that we have a stalemate in terms of who will be Speaker of the House, with Kevin McCarthy having about 202 votes. The Democrat Hakeem Jeffries has 210, 211, and others are getting 19. Other Republicans are getting 19. Interestingly, Jim Jordan got 19 votes for Speaker, and he actually nominated Kevin McCarthy. Let's see what Jim Jordan actually had to say.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
I rise to nominate Kevin McCarthy for Speaker of the House. I rise to nominate Kevin McCarthy for Speaker of the House.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I think we have three objectives this Congress, three fundamental things we have to get done in the 118th Congress. First, pass the bills that fix the problems. In 2 years' time, we have a border that is no longer a border. We have a military that can't meet its recruitment goals. We have bad energy policy, bad education policy, record spending, record inflation, record debt, and a government that has been weaponized against we the people, against the very people we represent. So we need to pass legislation to address all that. And I hope my Democrat colleagues will join me. I really do. But I have my doubts. And if they don't, and if Chuck Schumer says, no, we're not going to take up that legislation that we pass, and if Joe Biden won't sign it, so be it. They'll have to answer to the people in 2024. Second, we can never, ever let a bill like the one that passed 12 days ago, $1.7 trillion spent, we can never, ever let that kind of legislation pass again. We have to pass a budget that makes sense, that's good common sense, then do the 12 appropriation bills that recognize it's the people's money, not ours, and send it to the Senate, and then stand firm on that legislation. And again, if they won't take it up and Joe Biden won't sign it, we can stand firm on a CR or something. We can have that fight, but we are not going to have what took place a week and a half ago ever happen again. And then finally, third, and this is important, we got to do the oversight, do the investigations. We have to do the oversight and the investigations that need to be done. This idea that...
Okay, there's Jim Jordan nominating Kevin McCarthy for Speaker. In the second vote, Jim Jordan, 19 Republicans voted for Jim Jordan for Speaker. And let me just break this down, because the people who are voting against Kevin McCarthy are doing so for good reason. They know Kevin McCarthy in many respects. They have found that they can't rely on Kevin McCarthy to keep his word, and Kevin McCarthy's had more than a decade of an opportunity to impress his colleagues as being speaker worthy, and he doesn't have 218 votes. That doesn't mean that he won't get 218 votes, but what it means is McCarthy's being tested right now as to whether or not what is he going to do to make certain that those objectives, those very simple principles that Jim Jordan laid out, actually are followed, that there is robust oversight, not just on Hunter Biden's laptop, but on the entire intel community and their abuses of power. There's oversight in terms of Department of Homeland Security and their failure to enforce our border laws. There's oversight virtually on the entire appropriations package to root out the corruption, to root out the waste, and get rid of it out of our budget. There's a ton of things that need to be done in terms of Congress actually doing their job and taking on the administrative state and cutting its funding, stopping its growth, and returning the power to the people. And so those are the things that Jim Jordan was talking about. Those are the things that I think every Republican in the room wants to accomplish. And what the 19 are saying is, we don't believe that that'll get accomplished under Kevin McCarthy. And so that's the fight. That's the belief system. So I'm not disparaging in any way those 19. I think they're engaged in an extraordinary, courageous fight. But I also believe that ultimately there's a real danger on the horizon, and that danger on the horizon is that has already been floated by Democrat Jim Costa from California, and that is that a retired member of Congress, Fred Upton, or some people have said Liz Cheney, form a coalition government where they get 200, all the Democrat votes for Speaker, and all they need are 5 Republicans in order to be a Speaker. So that's what the Democrats are holding out as a means to grab power and to negate the election. So the challenges faced in this delicate operation is to be able to keep the Republicans together in the House insofar as having an agreement that they will not support a coalition government. The challenge is, this last election did not leave margin for error, and there are a number of Republicans, some newly elected, who come from places where a coalition government would be good politics. So this is a very, very, very difficult kind of situation to get through. Here's what I anticipate is going to happen. I anticipate there's going to be one more vote today, at least one more vote today. The 19 will hold strong. They will then, if they may do a fourth vote just to do it again. But I think after a third vote, they'll likely vote to adjourn for the day and then spend the evening attempting to come to an answer that gets to 218 votes. For 218 Republicans supporting the same candidate. That may be McCarthy, it may not be McCarthy. But I think that's what's going to happen. And so this is real drama in DC, and the Speaker matters, who controls matters. People say, well, coalition government, what could be so bad about that? Coalition government puts you in a position where Joe Biden could try to do budget reconciliation again in agreement with a Fred Upton, who, by the way, when Obama won in 2008, Fred Upton was the first Republican to say, I can work with you across the aisle and support all of Obama's crazy policies. That was Fred Upton. Fred Upton has been a thorn in the side of anybody who's a conservative for his entire existence in Congress, and would be a disaster as Speaker for anybody who cares about any of the things that Jim Jordan laid out. And that's why I played that video clip, because it's what's at stake. And ultimately, this is whether or not we're going to see if they can come to a conclusion that doesn't create an environment where some people who are elected as Republicans decide that they'd be better off operating under essentially a Democrat-controlled system with a little bit of with the power of the speakership. But the majority leader becomes the Democrat. The whip becomes the Democrat, and unfortunately, I'm old enough to be, and I'm from California, and I've seen the people of California vote for a Republican majority in the California State Assembly, and Willie Brown was the Speaker, who most people now just know as Kamala Harris's mentor, so to speak. But he was the Speaker, smartest guy in California politics for years. And what he managed to do is, with 39 out of 80 votes, he managed to become Speaker again because 2 Republicans flipped and elected him Speaker. And they got committee chairmanships out of it. And they flipped and elected him Speaker. That's happened in my lifetime. I watched it happen. I shook my head because, and the Republicans, by the way, never got another chance in California to lead the assembly. So they, maybe Barolti did, I can't remember. But essentially, it was the end of the heyday of Republican politics in California. And so there's long-term consequences here also. So we're going to watch how this game gets played out. But I would caution the 19 that, don't end up with a very bad outcome because you're trying to get a slightly better outcome. And I would tell the people voting for McCarthy, it's, if you want to control the floor, if you want to accomplish your agenda, if you want to meet what you promised your constituents you're going to do, you're going to figure out a way through this. And if that way doesn't include Kevin McCarthy, so be it. Our country is more important than one person. And it is essential that the Republicans come to a consensus on who will be Speaker, because this is the first of many hard votes where Republicans are going to have to figure out how to take people who don't agree on a significant number of policies, certainly on social welfare, social conservative policies, don't agree, have to come together and figure out what to do and how to hold themselves together as a conference. It's extremely hard. It's going to be a problem for 2 years. It's unavoidable. When the Republicans only got 5-vote majority, I said at the time I didn't believe that Kevin McCarthy would end up being Speaker because of just because there were enough votes against him in the conference, enough people he done political damage to over time who now could do political damage to him. So all in all, this is going to be a little bit of a bloodletting, but hopefully they will come together, come to consensus, and end up with a Speaker and House rules that make sense, along with some conservative involvement in leadership and and on committee chairs, because ultimately one of the challenges is conservatives don't control any power levers in the House Republican world, with the exception of Jim Jordan, who's going to be the Judiciary Committee chairman. And I think conservatives have a right to ask to have a much more conservative leadership and committee chairs than currently exist. And they have a right to ask that because the Republican constituency is much more conservative than the congressional Republican constituency. And so ultimately, this is about direction of the country, and we will see how it plays out. But while it may seem like it's kind of a spectator sport or silly, these guys are fighting over the direction of the country and how the House is going to be run for the next 2 years. And quite honestly, they're willing to sacrifice their political futures to do it. So you have to hold them in high esteem for their willingness to actually stand up and make and put their name on the line, put their careers on the line. I'm going to just take a look. Maggie Sterling, Jim Jordan for Speaker of the House. I would love Jim Jordan to be Speaker of the House. Jim Jordan doesn't have 218 votes. And the one thing we know is the House Freedom Caucus will not be rewarded by the people who support McCarthy for dumping Kevin McCarthy. So, but Jim Jordan, one of the really great guys in Congress. I know him well, and he's one of the great guys in Congress who really is willing to fight for what's right. And he makes a determination that he believes McCarthy will fight for the things that he laid out. Ronald Knapp, McCarthy for Speaker of the House. I think that's a lot of people hold that opinion, and it's and I've spent time warning fellow conservatives that I put it in a piece I wrote today, if you choose to spill the apple cart and turn over the apple cart, you better have a plan for picking it back up and picking up all your apples. And if you don't have a plan to do that, then you better think twice about spilling the apple cart and knocking over the apple cart. So it's Kevin McCarthy spent a lot of time in Congress. He's put in a lot of time, but the truth of the matter is he's spent millions upon millions of dollars in campaign money to defeat conservatives in primaries. And so that is part of what's coming back, kind of chickens that are coming back to roost for him. Let's see. Please, no Democrat. Yeah, Diana, no. Yeah, gosh. That is the worst case scenario. The Democrats are now floating it, and there are Republicans who have said in the past and flirted with that idea in the past. So it's a really precarious game that's being played, and we'll just see what happens. Go Jim Jordan. Yeah, one of the interesting things on Jim is Representative Jordan is that his fellow members of the Freedom Caucus, the 19 who voted against McCarthy, really slapped him in the face somewhat, because not a single one of them was moved to support McCarthy because through his impassioned speech. And it brings into question for the left, why should we accommodate the people in the Freedom Caucus if even their putative leader, as Jim Jordan has been for years, can't persuade them to do something? And that is because the definition of power is not having one vote, it's how many votes you can bring along with you. And we don't know how many votes Jim Jordan brought along with him beforehand, but the fact is he didn't change a single mind through what was a very powerful and persuasive speech. And by the way, a courageous speech, because the left hates Jim Jordan. They hate him because of his role in taking down John Boehner. They hate him because he went after Paul Ryan pretty aggressively and fought for freedom every step of the way. So there's not a lot of love lost for Jim Jordan on the left and the Republican circles. And so he's put himself out there, and it's very dangerous. Let's see. Kevin McCarthy, Speaker of the House, let's impeach Biden. Joe, I have to tell you, I think the impeach Biden is not going to happen because, quite honestly, I don't think there's 200 votes on the Republican side to do it. And the people who wouldn't vote to impeach Biden are all the ones supporting Kevin McCarthy. But that's there might be 218 votes to impeach Alejandro Mayorkas, the Secretary of Department of Homeland Security, and force him to defend in the Senate his policies of his open border policies. That might be possible. But I think right now, the impeachment of Joe Biden, when you didn't get 230, 240 Republicans elected in the House, the effort to impeach Joe Biden kind of is stillborn right now, unless stuff comes out in the Hunter Biden investigation that is so egregious that warrants the impeachment. And quite honestly, I don't know how many of the Republican members actually know what's in the laptop. I think the average citizen out there who pays attention knows more about what's in the laptop than Republicans. And the reason I think that is because during the many Trump impeachments, I was always shocked to find out that House members and senators didn't know basic facts about Russia collusion or what was happening in Ukraine, and hadn't been, they're doing their own job and they weren't paying attention to this other stuff. And quite honestly, the fact that they had to be introduced to information that the general public who just pays attention knew was stunning to me. So that's why I think the only way Biden gets impeached is if there's true outrage as the general public finds out more and more about the Hunter Biden laptop and what's been going on in terms of money being transferred through Hunter Biden to Joe Biden's pocket. Republicans are not sitting together like, oh, that's what we lose all the time. Think about what you said. They spend money, millions and millions. That's stupidity. Yeah, it's one of the challenges. I'm just gonna lay this out. It's hard because I have participated in efforts to take down speakers, and some successful, most not. And ultimately, the establishment class has control of Washington. And for those of us who are fighting to try to change things, trying to make things better, trying to push an agenda that limits government, the challenge is that there's a lot of people on both parties who like big government. And it's incremental whether they want really big government or just to expand it some. And one of the few times you get a chance to change that direction is when you're talking about who the speaker is going to be. And because the money, and I'm talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, were spent by Kevin McCarthy's PAC to ensure that Kevin McCarthy's chosen people got elected. The fact that Kevin McCarthy's PAC did not spend money in a district like Maryland 6, which is Western Maryland, and was a +1 Trump district, didn't spend money there. Their primary candidate didn't win, so they let the guy who won hang out to dry, even though he was an established state delegate and had real following in the district. They let him hang. This followed when, if you remember, Dan Bongino many years ago ran for that same seat in Congress, won on election day, and lost in when the absentee ballots were counted. And it was because, once again, the Republican establishment did not put a dime into supporting Dan Bongino. So the challenge is, if you're somebody who's principled conservative, is what do you do? Do you continue to support the status quo and just take it and be shoved into a corner when they don't need your vote anymore? Or do you fight to have conservative principles and somebody who at least hasn't been adverse to conservative principles to be speaker in one of the few opportunities you have to have a Republican speaker election? And that's a really hard choice, but it's a choice which ultimately you have to make a decision of where you're going to draw the line in the sand. And truthfully, the only place a lot of these guys have an opportunity to draw a line in the sand is on a vote where they can stop something from happening. And this is the one chance they may have in the next 2 years before, whether or not Kevin McCarthy keeps a promise or not. So it's a challenge, and we have a big fight in our office about it and what should happen. So it's reasonable people can disagree. I just will tell you, this is hardball politics, and it's being played over real issues, over really important issues about the direction of this country. And it's one thing to say I support certain direction of the country, and it's another thing to stand up and say, we have to have proof. And we'll see tonight, after tonight, when they have probably meetings all night long trying to come up with a consensus candidate. It could be McCarthy with certain promises, but we'll see what happens after the meetings tonight. But I expect today for us to go into to January 4th, 2023 without a speaker. Let's see what else we have here. We need our borders closed. Our country. Yeah, Evelyn, that's fundamental. And I will tell you, we had a number of House Republicans, over 40 House Republicans vote for the omnibus bill that did nothing to close the border, did nothing to protect the border. They didn't sit there and say, no, I'm not voting for my special interest because it doesn't deal with the border. With the House majority as thin as it is, what you need to have people standing up and saying, we are going to force you to defend the border. We're going to constrict your funding to do other things unless you're defending the border. And so that's going to be a trigger point in the negotiations on how to fund the government in September. But truth is, if you don't, votes matter. That's the only thing that matters. If you don't have 218 Republicans willing to stand on that principle, you can't win on that principle. And so we're going to be fighting that tooth and nail over the next 9 months. And hopefully people will be pulling the oar alongside of us, and we'll be able to get something positive done to try to stop the destruction of our country, destruction of our sovereignty through letting 200,000 illegal aliens enter our country every single month on average. With that, I'm just going to close with a quick prayer. Lord, I lift up members of Congress. I lift up their each and every one of them, no matter how they're voting on this. I ask that you give them the wisdom to be able to work through this challenge and elect a speaker who will stand up and not cave in on issues related to limited government, related to our country's sovereignty, related to our country's defense, and related to our national character. Lord, just please intervene, give them wisdom to work through this dilemma. And no matter who becomes speaker, please make it so that person will be somebody who looks to you for their guidance. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay, folks, thank you for tuning in. That's all I got. That's the Insider Scoop. And the Insider Scoop is, if you've been watching C-SPAN, I don't know any more than you do. But I can give you a little analysis on it. We will be talking. I'm going to be up on the Hill all day tomorrow. I may be able to do a quick broadcast tomorrow, depending on what happens. But my plan is to be on the Hill all day tomorrow on a lot of different things. So we probably won't be revisiting until Thursday. With that, have a great day.